All right, big stuff today. Let's void some warranties. We're going to paracord a Model O. We're going to do a shell swap. We're going to pull the LEDs out of one of the Model O's, see how much weight we can save. We've got a new US-based paracord company in the form of Spektrum Designs. And there's one more thing. Oh yeah, any Zowie paracord you have already will fit the Model O perfectly. You ready? Let's go. Yo, I'm Brian P. You're watching BadSeed Tech, and today we're going to get under the hood of the Model O. We're going to tinker around a little bit in there. We're also going to take a look at some paracords from a new company called Spektrum Designs. So please be aware that pretty much everything we're going to do today is going to void your warranty, and once you crack the shell open on that Model O, you're going to want to be really careful because the connecting strips that link the LEDs to the PCB are these really thin ribbons, and they're really easy to damage if you're not being careful. So Brian, did you actually damage one of the strips inside the mouse? Maybe I did, and maybe I didn't, okay? I definitely did, yeah. So we're gonna take a look at the process first, and then towards the end of the video, we'll circle back around. I'll give you my impressions on the Spektrum cable versus the Paraflex cables and versus the CeeSA cables. And in case you missed it in the intro, yes, if you have a paracord laying around that you ordered in for a Zowie mouse, it is 100% good to go for the Model O. It's the same connector, it's the same pinout, it's a direct plug. And for those wondering, yes, a custom aftermarket paracord is still going to be a better experience than the stock Ascended cable that comes with the Model O. All right, we need to assemble some tools. Before I paracord a mouse, I make sure I have a few things nearby. A heat gun or a hair dryer, a lighter of some sort, preferably a long stem like a candle lighter, new mouse feet, a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. You can find these in jewelry repair kits. You can get these for dirt cheap at like a Walmart or a Target or whatever you have close by. And optionally, but encouraged, like an alcohol prep pad or some Q-tips and some isopropyl alcohol. Now the reason for the heat gun or hair dryer is that we're going to heat up the mouse feet that we're going to remove. This makes them really warm and pliable, also makes the adhesive come loose a little easier. That means that number 1, you can remove these without bending them up in the event you're going to try to reuse them, and 2, 99% of the time it's not going to leave any extra adhesive on the mouse body that you're going to have to remove. So we're going to heat up just the rear feet and remove them slowly and carefully. Hi, I just wanted to stop the video real quick and talk about a couple of very important points here if you plan on using heat on the underside of your mouse. Number 1, you'll notice that my thumb is over the sensor when I'm doing this. That's very much on purpose. You need to be very careful to protect your sensor anytime you're using heat on the underside of your mouse. And 2, while I've used this technique on numerous solid body mice and the final mouse before, the plastic is different here. The holes are a lot closer together, so the plastic's a lot thinner. So if you don't keep that heat moving, you're gonna run the risk of actually warping those hexagons, like I did. You need to be very, very careful if you're gonna use heat on the underside of this mouse. It does not affect the performance, but it doesn't look great aesthetically. I'm gonna let you guys get back to the video. I'm gonna go reflect on the numerous L's I took during filming. You just need to get something under the edge, whether it's a fingernail, the end of a pocket knife, whatever. You'll find 2 screws under there, so let's get those out and then we can pull the shell apart. There's no need to remove the front mouse feet. So there's these 2 ribbons connecting the LEDs and the top of the shell to the PCB. Now, if you're just doing a paracord mod, you probably don't need to disconnect these. Just be careful. If you're gonna go ahead and do the full shell swap, I would advise disconnecting these because the 2 clips you're going to need to access sit basically right behind these 2 ribbon cables. You're just going to real carefully get a fingernail or whatever up under the top of the ports, pull up on the black clip on both sides, and then that ribbon should turn loose. So we're going to find where that mouse cord comes in and attaches to the PCB. There'll be a little port there and a little plug. We're going to use the same method. Just get your fingernails under each end and work it back and forth carefully. Don't pull directly from the wires, obviously, and make sure you're supporting the port on the PCB as you're doing so, and just get that disconnected. So on the paracord itself, we're gonna need to space out enough of the bare wire to reach down to the lower shell. I cut this one a little close. Use the original cable as a template. Now you could use the heat gun here to melt this heat shrink, but you need to be careful because unless you've got like an itty bitty tiny heat gun, it's gonna be hard to keep that heat moving around, and you're gonna risk melting the paracord as well as the heat shrink. So for this, I really advise using the lighter. With the lighter, you can really get in and do some more controlled detail work. Just do yourself a favor and keep that flame moving around and only use the blue part near the tip of the lighter. The idea here is that you don't want to leave the heat in any one place for too long for obvious reasons. So we're going to use that first part of the heat shrink to secure the paracord to the bare wires inside. Once you get that knocked out, you can plug this thing in kind of to the port and get an idea for how much cable you're going to need so we can figure out the positioning of the front heat shrink, which is going to help keep that cable inside the mouse body as well as act as a stress relief on the outside. The Model O is honestly one of the trickier mice I've done. The clear plastic ring on the heat shrink is normally what we'd use as a retainer to keep the cable from pulling out of the mouse body. There's just this little bitty area here where that's going to fit into, so I would have preferred on the Spektrum cable that clear portion of the heat shrink be about half the length as it was. The other challenge here is that, like a Zowie mouse, there's not a lot of room between the bottom of the scroll wheel and the lower mouse shell. That means you really need to do your best to keep the heat shrink and the paracord away from the bottom of your scroll wheel, or obviously it's going to make operating your scroll wheel a little difficult. End of the day, this is not my cleanest install, but it gets the job done, and once the mouse is assembled, it still looks really sick and functions great. So don't beat yourself up too bad if yours is a little messy, because whew, this one's rough. If I do another one of these Model O's, I might actually experiment with just leaving the bare wire all the way until it gets ready to exit the mouse. All right, now if you have a couple of these mice in a couple different colors and you want to do a two-tone mod by swapping the top shells, it's really pretty easy. You just need to be really careful with the LED ribbons. Now, I can't take credit for this. Shout out to Reddit user Extraco from Mouse Review for the original idea. This happens in two parts, removing the lower shell, then removing the top trigger assembly. You do not need to pull the assembly for the DPI switch. There are 3 points for the lower shell. You can use your finger or the edge of a small flat blade screwdriver, but you'll need to pop the two lower two pretty much simultaneously, and then the center tab, and the lower shell will just come right off. There's 2 contact points in the middle to remove the trigger piece. And when you put the trigger assembly back on, you need to make sure you start at the top and hook them in before you seat the 2 center clips, or you're gonna have to start over. So a pretty clean aesthetic here with the black top, white frame, or white top, black frame. This does impact the way the RGB looks though, so it'll be really muted inside the black frame with the white top, less so with the white frame black top, but still not as bright as the all-white assembly. It's a pretty clean aesthetic for sure, but I'm pretty partial to the all-white, so I decided to stick with that. Now, definitely not because I damaged the RGB strip inside the black model. I decided to pull both those LED strips out and see how much weight we could save. Removing those 2 pieces got the weight of the matte black model with the stock cable down to 63 grams. It saved us 4 grams. I did opt to leave the lenses installed in the frame because number 1, they're part of the frame, and number 2, they're glued in, so I didn't really want to make that move. But theoretically, you pull those out, you could probably score another 2 grams. So as far as the actual paracord itself, as I said, we've got a new company. This one's US based. It's called Spektrum Designs, and he sent me out a few cables to check out. Pricing's still $15 per cable. The selection's a little more limited than what you're gonna find at Paraflex, and depending on where you live, shipping's gonna take anywhere from like 2 to 3 days and range anywhere from like $3 to $5. For me, it took 2 days, it was $3. Most of you are familiar with Paraflex cables. Some of you out there may be familiar with CeeSA cables. CeeSA makes the highest quality cables hands down, but to get your hands on them, you're gonna need money and patience because he's based in Germany. The wires inside of a CeeSA cable are thicker than the wires inside of the Paraflex. Personally, I think this is higher quality and has better durability, and for me, does not affect the performance of the paracord in any way in terms of like flex or drag or weight or anything. To say that a different way, I don't believe that using these really thin wires inside improves the performance of the paracord. The Spektrum cable uses the same gauge wire that we see inside the CeeSA cable. That's a plus for me. The downside is that they also use the cheaper USB connector that we see on the Paraflex cable. The CeeSA USB connector is heavy duty, really high quality, and has this slide up clear stress relief. On the Spektrum cable, this connector does not close all the way around the paracord. You can still see the paracord through parts of the connector. I'm not sure how Paraflex overcomes this since they use the same connector, but I'm sure it's just a matter of them using the thinner gauge wire, as I don't see this on any of the Paraflex cables I have, but it's present on all of the cables that I got from Spektrum. It's not a huge deal, but it is an area where they could improve the product, and honestly, I'm just pretty stoked we have a different alternative where we can get paracords. For those curious, I did take some close-up shots of the glorious replacement feet versus the Hyperglide material. They're not identical, but they are pretty close. It's worth noting here too that because I got these nice and warm with the heat gun before I pulled them off, I was able to reuse them just fine. I didn't wind up using the replacement feet that I ordered from Glorious. Before you stick your mouse feet back on your mouse, it is advisable to hit that area with an alcohol pad or a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, not the foot, the actual mouse frame. You do this to make sure you don't have any oil from your fingers. It's going to keep the adhesive from doing its job. So there it is. Hope that answers some questions for you, and big thanks to Spektrum for sending out some cables for me to check out. And don't forget that everything we looked at today voids the warranty on the mouse, so you do all this stuff at your own risk. I will leave a link to all the cables that we talked about in today's video. If you got any questions about anything I covered, just hit me in the comments or drop by the Discord. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button, and until next time, stay up.